It was a cold evening, and the city streets were alive with hurried footsteps, glowing storefronts, and the distant hum of car engines. Among the rush of people heading home, a man in a sharp suit staggered forward, clutching his chest. His breath was uneven, his vision blurry. He tried to call out for help, but his voice barely made a sound. People passed him by, some sparing a glance, but no one stopped. In a world where time was money, few had the luxury of compassion. And then, a hand reached out. A frail, dirt-covered hand that belonged to a woman wrapped in an old shawl. Her eyes, though tired, held kindness. "Sir, are you okay?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. The man could barely respond, his body weak from exhaustion and stress. She quickly took out a small bottle of water from her worn-out bag and handed it to him. "Drink this. Take deep breaths," she said, steadying him with her other hand. Minutes passed, and slowly the man began to regain his composure. He looked at the woman before him, her clothes tattered, her face weary, yet her presence calm and reassuring. For the first time in years, he felt something strange, gratitude mixed with guilt. "You saved me," he whispered, his voice hoarse. The woman simply smiled. "Everyone needs help sometimes." Before he could say more, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Days later, the man, Ryan Carter, a self-made millionaire and CEO of a major corporation, found himself unable to forget the woman who had helped him when no one else had. He had built his life believing that success meant never needing anyone. But in that moment of weakness, it was someone who had nothing who had saved him. Determined to find her, he instructed his team to search the streets. And then, after days of looking, they found her sitting on the same corner, holding a small, cardboard sign that read, "Hungry? Need work? Anything helps." Ryan stepped out of his car and approached her. The woman looked up, surprised to see him again. "I owe you my life," he said, looking her in the eyes. "Come work for me." The woman hesitated, unsure if he was serious, but there was something in his voice, something sincere. She nodded slowly. "All right?" But neither of them knew what was about to happen next, because what she did after joining his company would change everything. Ryan Carter wasn't sure why he felt so strongly about helping this woman. Maybe it was guilt, maybe it was fate, or maybe it was something he couldn't quite name. But what he did know was that she had saved him when no one else had, and now he wanted to return the favor. As they drove to his office, the woman sat quietly in the passenger seat, her fingers gripping the edge of her worn-out sweater. She hadn't asked many questions, nor had she shown excitement or fear. She simply stared out of the window, watching the towering buildings blur past. "What's your name?" Ryan finally asked. "Emily," she said after a pause. He nodded. "Emily, do you have any work experience?" She hesitated before shaking her head. "Not really. I used to do odd jobs, cleaning mostly. But things got tough and, well, here I am." Ryan glanced at her, taking in the exhaustion in her voice. He had seen hundreds of resumes in his life, hired countless employees, yet something about Emily made him more curious than usual. When they arrived at his office building, Emily looked up in awe. The glass structure stood tall against the sky, its golden lights gleaming even in the daylight. People in expensive suits walked in and out, talking into phones, checking their watches. She suddenly felt small, out of place. "You'll work here?" she asked, almost in disbelief. Ryan gave a small smile. "You will." Inside, his employees shot confused glances as Emily followed him. They had never seen their boss with someone like her before. Whispers started almost immediately. Ryan ignored them and led Emily to his personal assistant, Claire. "Get her set, up with a basic position," he instructed. "Something she can learn quickly." Claire blinked. "Sir, are you sure?" "Yes," he said firmly. "She starts today." Emily spent her first few days adjusting to the new environment. She was given a simple job, helping in the mail room, organizing files, running small errands. It wasn't much, but it was more than she had in a long time. But while she worked, she listened. She paid attention to conversations, watched how people treated one another. She noticed the arrogance in some, the fear in others. She saw how employees whispered about Ryan when he wasn't looking, how some admired him while others resented him. One evening, as she was leaving, she overheard a conversation in the hallway. Two men dressed in sharp suits stood near an office door, speaking in hushed voices. "He has no idea," one of them muttered. "By the time he figures it out, it'll be too late." Emily froze. "Everything is going according to plan," the other said. "A few more weeks and he'll be out. We'll take control and no one will question it." Emily's heart pounded. She didn't understand everything, but one thing was clear. Someone was planning something against Ryan. She turned and hurried away before they could see her. That night she lay awake on the small bed Ryan had arranged for her in a nearby apartment. She owed him everything. He had given her a chance when no one else had, and now someone was trying to take everything from him. She had to do something. But how could a woman who had nothing fight against men who had everything? Emily couldn't sleep that night. The words she had overheard kept repeating in her mind. Someone was planning to take Ryan down, and he had no idea. She had no proof, no details. But she knew one thing. She couldn't stay silent. The next morning, she arrived at work early, watching the two men she had overheard the night before. They carried themselves with confidence, speaking to other executives as if they already owned the company. Emily started paying closer attention, listening to conversations, watching how files moved through the office. It didn't take long for her to notice something strange. Financial reports were being altered. Deals that seemed solid on paper had hidden loopholes. And worst of all, Ryan's name was being tied to decisions he hadn't made. She needed to tell him. But when she finally got a chance to speak to Ryan in private, he barely looked up from his desk. "Emily, I appreciate your concern, but I've been in this business a long time. I know how things work." "You don't understand," she insisted. "They're setting you up. If you don't act now," Ryan sighed and set down his pen. "Emily, I hired you because I wanted to help, but this is beyond your role. Trust me, everything is under control." Frustration bubbled inside her, but she could see it. He wasn't dismissing her because he didn't care. He simply didn't believe it was possible. He thought he was untouchable. But he wasn't. Days passed and Emily felt helpless. The two men continued their work, quietly weaving their trap. Ryan remained unaware, and she knew time was running out. Then an idea struck her. She waited until late at night, when the office was nearly empty. She had learned enough about the company's systems to know where to look. Sneaking into one of the executive offices, she opened a drawer and flipped through documents. Her hands shook as she found what she was looking for: copies of falsified records, emails framing Ryan for financial misconduct. She took pictures of everything. The next morning, she went straight to Ryan's office. This time, she didn't ask for permission. She placed her phone on his desk and pressed play, letting him hear the recordings she had secretly taken of the men discussing their plan. Ryan's expression changed instantly. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing as he listened. When the recordings ended, silence filled the room. Then Ryan picked up his phone. "Get legal in here, now!" The events that followed happened quickly. The executives who had been plotting against Ryan were confronted, and when faced with undeniable proof, they had no choice but to confess. The company's legal team moved swiftly, and within days the men were removed from their positions and charged with fraud. Ryan was safe. His company was safe. And it was all because of Emily. As they stood in his office after everything had settled, Ryan looked at her with something different in his eyes. Not just gratitude, but respect. "You saved me," he said, repeating the words he had spoken to her the day they met. Emily smiled. "Everyone needs help sometimes." Ryan chuckled. "I think I underestimated you," she shrugged. "You're not the first." A week later, Ryan called her into his office again. But this time, it wasn't just to thank her. "I want you to stay," he said. "Not in the mailroom. I want you to work with me officially. You've proven you're smart, resourceful, and loyal. I need people like you." Emily hesitated. A part of her still couldn't believe how much her life had changed. But looking at Ryan, she realized something. This wasn't just about a job. It was about a second chance. For both of them. She nodded. "Okay." And just like that, the woman who had once sat on the streets with nothing now had a future she never imagined. Not because of luck, but because she had chosen to fight, for herself and for the man who had once done the same for her.